Hey there, welcome to the Hearing Nation podcast, and so glad you tuned in. Just want to say hello to our amazing patients out there, past, present, and future, and especially in retirement community. We think so often about you. This is for you and for your families that care about you and help take care on your journey, as well as staff members in retirement community. We want a special shout out to you. Thanks for everything you do, how hard you work. We see you, and you matter to us too, so thanks for everything you're doing. Woke up early this morning because we want to bring you some special content, and we want to introduce you to our guest, Tim Cross. And I'm going to read a little bio here, so forgive me for not staring at you, but this man's amazing. I'm really excited. I'm going to tell you more about him in a second, but here is the bio. All right, Tim graduated from the University of Dayton in communication and marketing with a bachelor's degree in business administration, and he was thankfully introduced to the hearing industry in 1985. So this guy has given his life to your ears. And while he was pursuing and finished his master's degree in biblical exposition. He's been a licensed hearing dispenser, a provider for actually 37 years. On the board, he's board certified in hearing instrument sciences since 1994. And he's served several terms on the Hearing Healthcare Alliance of Ohio Board of Trustees. And Go Ohio. Presently a member of the Ohio Speech and Hearing Professionals Board. He's a member of the President's Advisory Council of a leading hearing aid manufacturer. If that's not enough, he's also the CEO of EarsLink. That's EarzLink. We're going to put that in the show notes underneath so you can go check out their website. They're a multi-office regional hearing care practice which he was instrumental in developing. And on a personal side, Tim is married to his beautiful bride, Brenda, and together they have 2 daughters and 2 sons and 7 grandchildren. It's a perfect number, Tim. As you well know, Tim enjoys singing and playing music, especially in church, teaches Sunday school, plays golf, hiking, and exploring God's creation with his family and friends. So Tim, I'm excited to welcome you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
And I got to, I know you know this, Tim, but I just want to reiterate that our primary audience, we hope, you folks out there, are a special group of people, primarily seniors, 75 years old to 105. I think we had a patient, maybe 108, just passed away recently, but that's like our babies, those that we love dearly and hold close, living in retirement community, still active, still got it, and this format, bringing you on, is a treat for us and for them, because we want to take your wisdom, squeeze it, and we want to give it to them to arm them to be better for this day forward for the rest of their life. And those of you who are watching, I'm so excited about sharing this guy with you. I've seen Tim around at some conferences. We're in the same group together, if you will, under a leading hearing device manufacturer, best technology in the world, by the way. And I got a chance to spend a little bit of time with him on the last conference, and there was something that was so different about him. I just knew I had to know this guy. I wanted to get to know what he knows, because I want to share that with you, and I also want to be a better practitioner for you guys, and our whole staff obviously does. And I think you're going to find that when you listen to what he has to give us, that it's going to be worth your time to listen to the whole long form of this, because I think there's going to be golden platinum nuggets all the way through, and I know it's going to be worth your time and help you get healthier. That ear-to-brain connection that we all talk with you about on a daily basis, we want that to be tip-top. So Tim, I just want to go back with you if you don't mind, and I want to find out. I read your bio and I go, wow. And if that's not enough, but then I look at you were introduced. I want to go back. Why did you come? Why did you become and give your life literally to become a hearing provider?
That's a very interesting story. It certainly wasn't on my radar, but God certainly has plans for us that we don't often recognize immediately, but it shows up and He guides us. And that's kind of what happened to me. I was actually working on my master's degree in biblical exposition down in Florida.
Yay.
And my plan was to complete my degree, and I believe God was leading me to go into ministry. And so while down there, I had a 2-year-old daughter and was trying to support them while going to school full time. And I met a gentleman in our particular program, and he had been down there doing the same thing. His father was a missionary church planting pastor, and he felt that God was leading him to expand his understanding of the scriptures. But his employment prior to this and during this time was in the hearing healthcare field. And so while he was down there, he partnered with a local audiologist to work with that individual while he was getting his education. And he knew I had a communications degree or background in communications and a business degree. And he knew that I had a young family. And he just introduced me and said, how would you like to make a little extra money for your family? And so he just introduced me to what he did. And he said, if you'll reach out to people and give them a safe invitation to learn more about their hearing, I will then go out and share where they are, what their present hearing condition is, what that means, and let them experience what they're missing or what they could be hearing. And he says, if I'm able to help them, then I will share a little something extra financially with you. And I thought, well, I could probably do that. So I went out on a Monday evening at about, I think just after dinner, probably 7 o'clock. And unbeknownst to me, he found some requests or leads, if you will, that were many, many years old. He didn't want to give me any of his good prospects because he didn't know me from anybody. And so he handed me these cards that were in the bottom of a box and said, just contact these people. And he was hoping that I might set him up 2 or possibly even 3 opportunities to test somebody's hearing. And I was too ignorant to know that that's what you were supposed to do. So I ended up setting him up 12 appointments in that short period of time. Unfortunately, I had him driving all over the place. He had to reschedule a number of them. But that was my introduction to the hearing industry. But he then brought me along to let me see what he did. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of went our separate ways. And I went back to Ohio and decided I was going to finish my education over the summer program. So went back, began working in a church on a lay basis, helping oversee the youth program and doing things I felt that I was supposed to be getting into. And about 2 years later, he contacted me and he said, how would you like to come and work with me? Mm-hmm. Well, I probably wouldn't have said yes at that time, except just about 3 or 4 weeks before that, I ended up in the hospital with 104 plus fever for a week, and they could not figure out what was causing it, and they couldn't get it to go down. And when I was released from the hospital after it finally went down, I did not have insurance at the time, and I had racked up thousands and thousands of dollars worth of medical bills with a second child getting ready to be born anytime. Wow. And there I was with all these bills and working in retail at the time with no insurance and no hope of being able to pay these bills off, and a new child, just like I say, my second child on the way. And that's when he called me. And I said, well, what would this look like? And he said, well, you could expect to help a lot of people like you saw me doing. And if you do a good job, you could expect to earn a certain amount of money. And I thought that would help me get out from under my debt. So honestly, I wasn't looking for this, but I was almost forced into it. And once I stepped into it, I absolutely loved what I was experiencing. And so it wasn't my initial plan. I'll give you one more chapter. When this gentleman who's just he was so wonderful in guiding me in the process and leading me, not in any way trying to convince me to do something, but he gave me a clear vision of what could happen. He gave me a realistic vision of what could happen. And when I stepped in, I moved away from my family, left them, and drove to a place I'd never been.
Mm.
And basically, we had to find a place. And there's more to this story, but I won't get into that. But ultimately, I set up and we moved out to West Virginia. And to give God the glory, within 12 months, all those medical bills were paid off.
Oh my.
And I was able to finish my biblical studies because I was able to step away for 6 to 8 weeks at a time in the summer and go back to graduate school. And then when I completed all that, after being in the hearing industry for 3 years and finding great satisfaction and success, I moved back to Ohio. So that is kind of what launched me into this area. On a side note, I'd always had a heart for people who were the underdog.
Right, right.
I remember my grandfather who worked in the lumber mills up in Wisconsin. I never knew him without hearing aids.
Mm.
And he was very kind, always had a smile on his face, but I didn't always understand as a child why I didn't connect well with him.
Mm.
And so as I got older, I had learned some valuable lessons how to connect with people. And I just remember the last time I spoke to my grandfather, it was his birthday, I believe, and everyone was trying to talk to him and wish him happy birthday on the phone because he was out of state. And most people would just say a couple words and then pass the phone on to somebody else. And I got the phone and I was able to have the longest conversation I ever had with my grandfather.
Oh,
and people
wow.
kept looking at me and saying, "Who's that? Who are you talking to?" I said, "I'm talking to Grandpa." They said, "No, you're not." I said, "Yes, I am," because I learned a valuable lesson, how to connect with people. And that's something I'd like to share at a future time as far as a topic that is very, very important, because talking to somebody and connecting with them is a totally different matter. So that's how I got into the hearing industry, and there's much more to the story, but I won't belabor that point right now because I'm sure there's much more you'd rather talk about.
But wait, go back a little bit.
Yes.
I heard you say in that first experience with that audiologist that you were setting appointments for, I think I heard you or saw you see something that was for you. And or second time around with this guiding person, there was something before we changed chapters that grabbed you. What was that you experienced with the hearing impaired people?
Well, first of all, I recognized that there was a hunger that people truly wanted hope. They felt that they were maybe not understood. They were being possibly even dismissed at times for their limited ability to connect with people or to always understand everything the first time. And I like I said, I was always for the underdog. And when I felt that I could elevate people to their full potential and reveal their true humanity to everybody else so that they could see them as people and not as an inconvenience or somebody who is less than whole, I found that extremely rewarding, that I could be used to transform lives. And I saw it first when somebody else was doing it, and I saw the change that occurred when they suddenly were reconnected with family and friends. And then I saw it again basically just by me, even in the beginning, calling somebody and talking to them and hearing how open they were to wanting to know that somebody cared enough to see that they might be able to receive help. And they would answer their questions that nobody else seemed to answer. I would say those would be the things that stuck out to me the most. And it just fits so well. And I have a servant's heart. I
Right.
believe that we are here on this earth to serve others, serve God first, and do so by serving others. And what better way to do it than to help people meet unmet needs, help them discover their true potential, and even connect them with people that matter most to them when they feel separated or disconnected. That conversation with my grandfather was so rewarding. I don't remember all the subjects. I just know that he lit up on the other end of the phone
Mm.
because somebody was talking to him and connecting with him. And that's why he just began to continue sharing and going on and talking in ways that never in my life was I able to experience that. And I thought, wow, that is something that more people need to experience, and people need to know how to help people experience that.
Boy, there's so much to unpack there. Maybe this will take us the rest of the time, Tim. I don't know, but I want to go back to the word hunger, and
Yes.
I also want to go back. I'm not sure who said it. It might have been Rush Limbaugh before he passed, after he lost his hearing. But whoever said something to the effect of, hearing loss is the only, quote, I hate to even say this word, disability that people have and get blamed for having it. Mm.
I have shared that. In fact, I believe I believe that because people in general don't understand hearing loss
Hmm.
and how it affects people, they tend to treat people with hearing loss in one of three ways. They will come to their own conclusion of what's going on, or they will judge the situation. They may look at somebody and see them as less intelligent
Yes.
because they don't seem to respond quickly or accurately, or sometimes they may say things that don't make sense. And so they make that judgment. Sometimes they look at somebody who doesn't respond in a timely manner and they think that they are self-centered or proud or aloof because they don't respond when you talk to them, or they tend to cut conversation short when in fact they're looking for a safe way out because they're
Right.
not connected and they don't want to be embarrassed or whatever. The second thing that people will do is they feel a freedom, as you said, to look at someone's limitations and either blame them for their shortcomings or make fun or light
Mm.
of
Ouch.
their inability to respond in the way that we expect them to. We find it easy to laugh at somebody when they say the wrong thing,
Right.
and nobody wants to be the brunt of a joke.
No.
And the third thing that people will tend to do is when they maybe they're kind enough to not want to make fun of somebody. Maybe they have even a moral sense of justice not to judge somebody, but they don't know how to respond to somebody that they can't connect with well.
Right.
And so they isolate themselves from that person, or they tend to possibly even dismiss them or just avoid them. And so people become very isolated. And
Hmm.
that's our culture. That's what we do.
Hmm.
Uh, we don't really know how to effectively communicate. Uh, I talk to my patients all the time, and I encourage them to have family members be a part of the solution, because correcting someone's hearing loss is not about fixing them. It's about helping them to hear their best, helping them to understand how their hearing loss affects them, but also helping other people to know what their limits are and what they can do to bridge the gap, or to have a meeting of the minds, come together rather than fixing him so I can get on with my life,
Right. Right.
getting rid of the
Yeah.
inconvenience. So I oftentimes will share four things. I'll say, first of all, people are always thinking about something. The human brain can focus on one thing at a time. It can move very quickly from one subject to another. But oftentimes, especially with the male brain, which tends to focus in, uh, I will call it compartments, we tend to think about things that are related. If I'm thinking about something and somebody wants to speak to me or address me, if they just start talking and their subject is not what I happen to be thinking about, there is not likely going to be a connection there. Do they hear you? Yes. Do they hear words? Yes. Are they really understanding what you're trying to communicate? Most likely not.
Right.
And so I encourage people to say, if you want to connect with somebody, here's four things you can do. You can, first of all, get their attention. There's different ways of doing that. You can say their name. That's always an endearing thing. It's positive. It makes people feel validated and important. It's a good thing, or at least uh, they're feeling like they're on an equal playing field. But say their name, or you can just gently touch them on the shoulder. Human touch will get your attention very quickly. Uh, I kiddingly will say to a spouse, "Yeah, you can throw your shoe at him and get his attention if he's
Right,
really glued
right,
up that to your television." But no, we're not doing that. So get their attention, and then give them a clue what you would like to talk about, so that the brain would have a chance to migrate to that subject or that category that you want to talk about. So they're ready for the conversation before it begins, rather than getting to the end of this conversation and they say, "What do you think about that?" About what? That's a very
right,
common occurrence when
right,
they're not really there.
right,
So connect. Number two, we want to be polite and look at somebody when we speak to them, addressing them. When we set this podcast up, it's set up so I can see you and
right,
you can see
right.
me. And that
Yeah,
works very well for both of us. And that tells me a lot. First of all, I know if we are engaged with one another, because if
right,
I'm looking at you and you happen to be married to your computer, I
right,
might slow down my conversation and think, well, is he really with me?
right,
And so it's important to look at somebody. Some people say, well, I'm standing right next to him or her. Well, clear sounds do not go around corners. And so if I'm standing next to somebody, one ear might be sending predominantly half of the brain decent information. The other ear, on the other hand, might be getting the Charlie Brown sound, like people know. So half the brain is getting that. And because you have no visual cues, you're not looking at the person, the brain will try to reconcile those two messages and make them agree with one another so that you can come to some semblance of what was said. And guess what? That's not going to happen.
right.
So, because they can't see you to fill in the blanks, if you will, and they've got confusing information, the brain is likely to cast that information out and look for another source of information. What did you say? So,
Right,
when you're
right,
not looking at somebody, you are almost asking somebody who has some hearing impairment or difficulty to ask you to repeat. So, we want to get their attention, give them a clue, look at them whenever possible. And number three, what do we do when somebody doesn't seem to be hearing us well? I said, we get
right,
louder. What does louder do to the person who has hearing loss? Well, it does a lot of things. First of all, our brain categorizes all sounds into about as many as 16 different categories. And if suddenly something is much louder than it typically is, it shifts categories and is now treated as perhaps as a sound of disturbance, or a sound of warning, or a sound of something that might very well have a negative message attached to it.
mm-hmm,
So now we don't want to start a conversation where the person is thinking that what is about to come to me is very negative by virtue of that loudness of the sound. But secondly, when we get louder, most people that I see know that sound is present. They just don't get the softer, higher frequency, clear speech sounds. And if we get louder, it tends to mask or shadow or cover those sounds. And
mm-hmm,
so we get less of them. So we're giving them less information. We're making our message negative before we've even started. And then when they're working to try to hear what you're saying, and they might even ask for some help, we get annoyed because they're not
mm-hmm,
hearing us. And what
mm-hmm.
have we done? We have sent a very bad message to the person, or certainly made it more difficult for them. So if we say, well, what's the alternative? They don't hear me. What's the alternative? Slower is much, much better than louder. All of you remember Walter Cronkite.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably the most easily understood news journalist of all time. And that's not knocking Edward R. Murrow and any of the others that were out there, but uh, definitely. And he did not speak and deliver his speeches and his talks with the delivery that we are so accustomed to hearing. And that's the way it was. We knew that and we could feel it. He didn't do that by accident. He researched and studied and determined and found that if he delivered his presentation at 124 words per minute, but that was the optimal level for gathering and maintaining a broad audience, and that he was going to connect with the most people and stay connected. So slower gives people more information, sometimes as much as twice as much information. We don't slur things, run them together, or cause them to be perceived that they're running together even if they're not, because of somebody's lack of hearing ability. And not only is slower better for that reason, but it gives the brain almost twice as much time to process the information. So realistically, somebody might hear 4 times better by simply speaking slower rather than getting louder. And also, we don't have that negative experience attached to the message and messenger. So those are positive things. But you know what? That gets us started on the right foot. But how do we stay there? We need to not just start together. We need to stay together and finish together to have meaningful communication. So what do we want to do? How can we make sure we're there? Well, we can ask them, did you hear me? Uh-huh. What does that tell us?
Right. Yeah.
I heard sound.
Yeah.
Did you understand me? Uh-huh. What does that tell us? Well, maybe I think I did. Maybe what I understood is not what you meant. Maybe I did understand you. Maybe I'm just saying I did, so you'll keep going so I can figure it out.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just agreeing with you because I have no idea what's going on and I want to be polite and I don't want to be left out. So how do we get the right question? Ask who, what, why, when, or how type questions. Where do you think we should go first? We're talking about our conversation for what's going to happen this weekend. How many bags of water softening salt do you think we should get? When do you think we should go to the post office? Those types of questions allow a response that confirms that the person is with me in conversation. It also engages them, thinking much more clearly, and they're likely to remember the conversation a lot more if they've been involved in it. And if you can't think of those type of questions to ask, it's not always easy to do that. Here's a simple question you can ask. Did you hear me? But sure I did. That doesn't answer it. What did you hear me say? That's not judgmental. What that person heard is what they heard.
Right.
And if they didn't hear what you wanted them to hear, guess whose fault that is? It's not theirs. They can only hear what they hear. It's my fault. I remember way back several years ago, we had 2 sprint relay teams that were poised to get the gold medal in the Olympics, the men's sprint relay team and the women's. In both cases, neither of them medaled. Neither of them, I don't think one of them got to the medal round. Because what happened was when they got to the exchange lane where they passed the baton, there was a foul that occurred and they got disqualified. I look at that baton as the message. And I look at that area of handing the message off as the effective communication opportunity. Obviously, I can't talk to you if I disconnected the Zoom call.
Right.
I'd still be sitting here and you'd still be sitting there, but we have a broken connection. So we have to have an area where communication is possible. So that's that zone. Then we have the sender of the message, and we have the receiver of the message. And if the person handing that message off, or that baton off, if you will, doesn't make sure it's firmly in the hand of the person who's receiving it, they're still responsible for that baton. If they don't pass it off within the zone, they're disqualified and they're out of the race and they're done. It's over. And so we're responsible for these things as communicators. It's not necessarily just about fixing that other person. And I've shared this with staff members at many nursing homes and retirement communities, as well as large civic organizations, and it has been very well received. Probably the most rewarding person that I shared it with was a psychologist.
Hmm.
I helped her mother with hearing loss. She was very concerned with her mother getting help, and she was so delighted. And she literally said to her mother, if I remember correctly, that, Mom, you look younger, because she was so relaxed and a lot of those wrinkles went off of her forehead and she was
Hmm.
smiling more and she was responding so quickly. She just said, You just look so much more youthful. Well, here's what happened a week later at a follow-up visit to see how mom was doing to make sure that there weren't any surprises. I had shared these same 4 points with her mother to connect. And she shared this with me. She said, You know, I have been using what you shared with my mother, but I also have been using it in my practice. And I used to
Absolutely.
think that my patients, my clients, were just getting very sensitive to the subject matter and closing down toward the end of my sessions. And we just didn't make a lot of progress. And I realized after I employed these same communication techniques that I was ahead of them in the process. I lost them. They
Hmm.
couldn't go on because I was ahead of them where they were, what they were thinking, and I was not effectively communicating with them. And when I started practicing that in my practice, we made so much more progress with my patients. And I'm a doctor. So what
Right.
about everybody else? And
Right.
that's what it hit me. Everyone needs to know this. This isn't something for special individuals. If you don't mind, I could share one more
Yeah,
story.
please. Yes, yes.
Years ago, I was invited to speak and address the residence program at the major hospital in the area, and I believe there were 28 physicians. The morning session was going to be all about the effect, how we communicate, the importance of hearing as it relates to overall health, and the afternoon was going to be a session where we brought in uh, an ear surgeon from Boston, I believe, to talk about all the different kinds of diseases of the ear. So, about 20 minutes into my talk, I felt this has got to be too basic for these doctors. They're getting
Hmm.
ready to go out into their own practices. They've been doctors for quite some time. They're just finishing up their final rotation or residency. And who am I to tell them these things? So I asked them, is this too basic or too elementary? I can go much deeper if we need to. And one of the doctors raised his hands immediately and he said, We didn't get any of this. And I thought,
Hmm.
if this is what happens in our medical community, where are people getting their information? How can they
Right.
effectively communicate? And so that is something that I am very uh, I guess, concerned about, and I share it with everybody that I have opportunity to share it. I thought about doing a TED talk on this subject
Right. Yeah.
and putting it out there so that it's accessible to everybody who might think about it. And it's not just for people with hearing loss. John Maxwell,
Hmm.
uh, uh, a brilliant author and business coach of many Fortune 500 company CEOs and executives, he wrote a book some 9, 10 years ago. Everyone communicates, but few connect.
Whew.
And I think that's where
Ouch.
we are. And what we can do within our with our industry and with what we do in our practices is we can help people learn how to connect and communicate again. They come in quite by accident, maybe because of
Right.
the hearing loss,
Yes.
but we can do more to help
Yes.
families reconnect. I've had many people say, you know, I hate to say this, but I have to tell you, you saved our marriage.
Oh my
I've
gosh.
seen teenage daughters, sometimes even with tears, say, You gave me my mom back.
Hmm.
Things like that are priceless, and yet the stories are countless.
Tim, a couple words, a couple of things come to mind, and we more of us use the word treatment now because we realize that, especially the word hearing aid is such a cheap version of how we treat hearing loss. There's so much more, as you just elaborated. But everything you just said to me falls under that umbrella of essential treatment, obligation that we have as practitioners to our patients. And the thought is this: I saw this dichotomy, and I see this beautiful 75, 85-year-old person who's shut down, ostracized maybe, and we talk over them because they have this condition of the hearing. I call it the ear-to-brain health connection. And so that's one way. Can you even imagine what they feel like when we talk over them and don't connect with them? Like that keeps me up, that keeps me in the game. And then on the other side of this dichotomy is when someone just takes the time to be interested. You gotta wanna.
Yes.
And what I heard you say was so beautiful, and we're definitely going to share this message because I think it falls under treatment and the way we should just treat other people. And so thank you for sharing that, like, priceless.
You know, one thought comes to mind when you said, how do people feel?
Ooh.
I was teaching an oral rehabilitation class, and simply that's how to get the most out of your hearing solution. And we made that available to anyone, whether they were fitted with hearing aids from anybody. And we had people coming in twice a month and learning important things, how to understand where they were, how they could best navigate the waters of hearing loss in their life. And most people came in as couples, but there was a gentleman who came by himself, and he seemed very quiet, did not say anything throughout the first 45 minutes or so of the class. And obviously, when I would go from subject to subject, there'd be a little bit of a pause before we moved on. And there was one of those pauses. And keep in mind, this would probably be back in the about 2000, 2001. And this gentleman spoke up, and he said, very abruptly but very emphatically, "I wish I had AIDS." And people just looked at him, and they stared at him, and they thought, what do you mean? Who would want that? And then he said this: at least then people would understand what I'm going through. Wow. What he was feeling in order to have there was so much welling up in him that he had to express that. He felt that there was a group of like-minded people who could understand where he was. After hearing others who were in the same boat that he was in, he felt a safe place to be able to share what was on his heart and what he was feeling that he couldn't tell anybody else. And if he did, they would think he was crazy. But we understood. And what he was really saying was, people don't understand me. They dismiss me, like we said earlier. They judge me, and they laugh at me. They make me feel like I don't want to be here.
Right.
I'm left out. And I think I left one other thing out that happens when they're in this position. Sometimes when we try to receive help, we're doing our best, the best we can do. Ask for a little help. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? And we hear these words, "Oh, never mind."
Oh, man. Oh,
what does that
hurts.
say to the heart of a person who is desperately trying to connect, and we dismiss them as if, I just want to let the dog out. In fact, we probably treat the dog better than we treat people with hearing loss at times, and we don't realize it. So I just wanted to touch on that we want to provide an understanding for the general public. Because if the general public once knows the truth of how we hear, how hearing loss affects people, and what we can do to bridge the gap and reunite people in meaningful relationships without inconvenience, but in a positive and meaningful way, I think once people learn those things and experience them, they will never go back to those judgment days or those dismissal days or those making fun of and demeaning days of somebody else when they're in those shoes.
Tim, it reminds me, and I know you've heard this before, if we go back to a quote from our old friend Stephen Covey, who said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I wonder if, as practitioners, you and I and other people in our groups and our associates, what if we truly sought first to understand our one patient? What if we truly were interested enough to ask questions and pause long enough to really listen and let them speak from the basement of their heart, those things they have welled up? What if we really listened to that? I don't know about you, that makes me want to do whatever I have to do and not obey any medical models of 7.5 minutes per visit and do whatever it takes. And I just wonder how far we would advance as practices if we really sought to understand our patients empathically, deeply.
Well, it brings up another story. I guess I'm a wealth of stories, but I remember back in 1988, I was sitting in Charleston, West Virginia, and it was I think a IHS chapter meeting, and there was training, and the presenter stood before us and said, all of you are coming into this industry, this field, at a marvelous time. He said, in the not too so distant future, you will find that people will be wearing miniature computers in their ears. And you will find that the number of people who need to be helped will be growing exponentially because all of those baby boomers will come into the place where they're in a need for your services. And we will have technology that's so advanced that we'll be able to help virtually everybody here beyond their expectations. So you will have people lining up at your doors, just not waiting to get what you have.
Right.
And I look right now and I say, well, that was a nice prediction.
Right.
And much of it came true. But one thing did not come true, and that was we don't have people lining up at our doors to receive what we have for them that could change their lives. And why? And you're starting to bump up against it, I believe, is that people don't know what they don't know. That's a very profound statement. They don't really understand their present condition, so they don't really see their need to the extent that it is, and they also have never experienced the alternative, so they can't make a decision based upon reality, only upon what they have been told by others or what they've been seeing in the lives of others. And so I think right now we lack a safe space to get information. And you were describing that. If we connect well with people and first get to understand where they are in their thoughts, what do they know? And where are they really in their hearing journey? Everyone has a hearing journey in this life because, as you know, these bodies degrade over time.
Right.
And so everyone is down on the pathway of declining hearing one path or another. And very few people have any clue where they really are. And we want to make sure we can provide a safe place for them to come and get information. Find out, where am I? What does it mean? And where could I be? Not, you have hearing loss, you're a good candidate for hearing aids, and we have A, B, and C based upon your lifestyle. If you have a quiet lifestyle, then you could get this. If you have a very active lifestyle, you need this. What would you like to do? They don't know. They haven't been given very good reason. And how does that affect where I live? Active lifestyle is a very generic term. You know, I don't look at anybody's need based upon their lifestyle so much as I give them the opportunity to experience their true hearing potential and what it could mean for them. They can experience for themselves and then make that decision based upon their personal experiences, not rather than what somebody tells them. Because how can you do that? I remember my first car I bought. Gentleman told me, I came in, I looked like Opie Taylor. You know, I was a young-looking kid. I was a senior in college, and I probably looked like I was a junior in high school. And I decided I'm going to get a car. And I walked into the dealership, and the young man there looked at me and said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I think I'd like to get a car. He says, they're out there.
Oh my gosh.
I was judged.
Right.
I was judged based on what somebody saw. So I went out there and I came back in. And he says, "Did you see one you like?" I said, "I think I did." I said, "But it's locked." So we walked out there and he unlocked it and let me sit in it, but he held the keys in his hand. Then we walked back in and he says, "Well, are you ready to get it?" And he started writing up a paper and I said, "I think I need a little more information." And so I went down the road and somebody sat down and said, "What were you looking for in a car?
Mm-hmm.
What are your expectations about this car? What's important to you in a car?" "Well, I needed to have four doors. I think I'd like to have a hatchback. I think I would." It was a four-door Chevette.
Okay. All right.
And I said, I'd like to get some reasonably good gas mileage because I drive a good ways. And he says, "Well, how about something like this?" He says, "Here, let me put a plate on here." He said, "You know what? If you give me your car, why don't you take it home tonight and you can bring it back in the morning and let me know what you think." I bought a car.
Mm-hmm.
He knew what I needed. He met me where I was. He let me make a decision based upon what was good for me. He let me talk to my parents about it, even though I was an adult. And you know what happened? My younger brother saw that I had a car and he went out and got one there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happens when we truly help people? We meet them where they are, we meet their needs and we exceed their expectations, and then we take care of them because fitting hearing aids is not an event. It's a part of treatment, like you say. And if we don't verify and validate where they are on a consistent basis, we can get off the path. And it's our
Mm-hmm.
job to make sure we're where they need to be based on them sharing with us what they're experiencing and us observing what we can measure and validate or verify. And so we do that regularly. And when we change their life and take care of them,
Mm-hmm.
we're not somebody that is just in their life that does a good job. We're somebody that they feel like compelled to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, and people see a change in their life and say, "What's going on with you?" And they're just excited and compelled to say, by getting treatment at St. John's Hearing Institute or wherever it might be, my life has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And when this person understands me, you need to see Robert, you need to see Tim, you need to see Bill, you need to see this person. And suddenly lives are changed, but they continue to be changed because it's not an event.
Right.
It's something that continues to happen.
Right. And Tim, I see this vision too of we, not just us as practitioners, but family members out there who I hope are listening, and not to bring shame, but empowerment to the way we treat the hearing impaired people we love, even those we don't love, out there in the public. And in a way, I see back over time, our history is that we have suppressed the health of the hearing impaired person by the way we treat them. And on the converse, we can help set that person free by connecting, by validating, by being authentically interested and helping them find a safe way to come out of isolation and to connect with us. And I think that's what I hear you say. I'm going to bring up a question that we had written down. In layman's terms, what does your patient process look like?
Okay. I would say that, let me give you a few simple examples. A patient comes into my office. Let's say I've never seen them before.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out a little bit about their past experiences, what brought them to the place of receiving help in the first place if they presently wear hearing instruments,
Mm-hmm.
kind of experiences have they had, and how did that measure up to their expectations. I want to know where they came from, and then I want to have a better understanding of where they are. And then in addition to that, I want to know, once I know where they are, where they feel like they would like to be, because they've come for a reason. And I might even ask them that, so who encouraged you to come and see me today?
Mm.
And what sorts of things have been going on that brought about this, you coming to see me? And I'd also want to find out, if this has been going on for some time, what was it about now that caused you to come in as opposed to 6 months ago?
Mm.
Because obviously it just didn't happen this morning at 6 o'clock and you just came to see me. And it helps me to understand their prioritization of how important things are to them, what is important to them. And then I can begin to have a picture and an understanding of what they would like to see happen. Then we want to find out where they really are. We need to get a picture and an understanding of where is their hearing and what does that mean. And once we've evaluated their hearing, their present hearing aids performance, we might look and see what are the capabilities within their instruments and find out, are they receiving the full potential and benefit of their hearing instruments that they've already invested in? And we'll discover, have we maximized their potential? And
Hmm.
if I have done that, then, and we're still noticing that there's room for improvement, then I would let them experience what I call their true hearing potential.
Hmm.
And once we've done that, their true hearing potential, then they have experienced something that is something they can make decisions about. If they decide that what they're experiencing in this process is beyond their expectations and what they were hoping for and well beyond, then we can offer them the opportunity to go through that rehabilitative process of meeting them where they are, what their brain can handle in terms of improvement, and then taking them to that full, ultimately, what would maximize their potential with the instrumentation that we would fit them with. And then at the end, we use a document that I call it the barometer of my hearing. And
Ah.
it's something that literally shows how well we did in improving their hearing where it matters to them in terms of subjectively. I'm hearing better. I'm hearing much better in these areas. But then we want to quantify that. Would you say that you're hearing effectively half of the time, three-fourths of the time, or almost always? And when we see that we have moved people from I can't hear much in these situations at all that's meaningful to me to a place of almost always, or most of the time at least, in those scenarios, they're usually telling me, this is amazing. I never
Hmm.
thought I could hear like this again. And that barometer travels with them through the life of our care. We revisit it regularly, we update it when changes are needed,
Hmm.
and then we update their hearing annually to make sure that change has not occurred. Because if the target moves and we keep aiming at the wrong target, then we're going to get farther and farther away from where they need and want to be. So that's kind of a general process of where we are. What I look for to verify these things is I always start with the physical fit of the instruments. That involves, are they comfortable?
Hmm.
Are they sealing the sound properly so that I'm receiving what we're sending? Because if
Hmm.
they're leaking and you're not getting what I think you're getting, then that's not good.
Right.
Are they too tight or are they misdirected? Are they sending sound in such a way that it can be distorted within the connection of the implementation of or the instrument going into the ear? Could be aimed incorrectly so that you're not getting sound centered in the canal, or it could be too tight where it's causing an occlusion effect where things sound muffled because of the tightness of it. Even though it's comfortable, it alters my perception. So I could do a real ear measurement, getting ahead of myself, and say I'm hitting target, and yet the patient doesn't
Mm.
perceive that sound.
Right.
So what's more important, that this tool says I'm hitting the target, or that the patient is able to perceive sound in a way that is accurate and desirable and most beneficial for them? Both are good tools, both are good things to consider, but we can't do one without excluding the other. And once we know that the fit is comfortable and that the hearing aid is staying in place consistently, then we want to find out, are there any sounds that they experience that they would consider to be out of bounds, sounds that are disturbing, sounds that are distracting, sounds that are unnatural, sounds that are annoying? Or finally, the final category, are there any circumstances or situations where you feel the sounds that you're hearing are, I'm having to work too hard to enjoy what I'm trying to hear, or I am not able to understand effectively in this environment to be able to maintain a connection with those I'm trying to talk with or listen to? Do I need help in some areas? And once we look at those three broad categories, we can then address each one of them, apply it to our barometer, and then once we follow up, we can make the appropriate adjustments, see if we can't verify an improvement in the setting that we're in, the patient validate that, oh yeah, that sounds much better, and then follow up and make sure that in real life, where it matters most, that we've truly moved them from a C to an A, for example, on the report card. And if that happens, then we can let go of them for a period of time until it's appropriate. And they also know that the door is always open, so that it's not about the scheduled appointment. It's about, if life changes, we're here for you. So that's kind of my approach to care with someone coming in with either existing hearing aids, or if they didn't have hearing aids, we would find out, what are you hearing and missing right now? We might do an aided sound field test to find out, what are you actually hearing? And we might compare one ear to the other to make sure that we don't have one ear that's causing problems with communication, because it can fool us in a quiet environment. We might have a dominant ear that understands very well in a quiet setting, and I would call it a remedial ear, one that's not able to perform to the same standard, but doesn't seem to complain as long as it's quiet. And if it was dependent upon that ear to hear in a difficult environment, it probably would not, it would fail. And the other ear would probably not enjoy the process because it's having to work alone or to try to overcome the inadequacies of the other ear. So those are other subjects we can delve into later, I imagine. But
well, I've got to jump in, because what I hear you saying is buying hearing devices is not like buying a car. You kick the tires, they hold air, it gets 22 miles a gallon, and you just drive. What I hear you describing to me is this treatment process starts and really never ends.
Correct.
And I hear you sharpen my vision as to, it doesn't sound like a great idea just to go buy to a retail center, buy a hearing aid and think everything's going to be okay. To look for a practitioner that will listen to me, will care, truly empathically care about me, and will follow me for life till death do us part. Am I coming close?
You're very close. And I would say the only thing that comes to mind about that is that you can have the very best hearing instrument, but a hearing instrument is only a part of the process. It only does what it's instructed to do.
Ooh.
You can have the best algorithm in the industry from a clinical standpoint for that instrument, and you can use the best real-ear equipment to verify that the sound at the eardrum, where they're perceiving sound, is spot on that target. And yet, if there is a fit issue, if there is a perceptual issue that the patient has due to, for example, recruitment, or just quite frankly, what they've been accustomed to hear over time, and the change is too great for them to accept that without being distracted or disturbed by it, you can have the worst experience. And probably my best example of this, and not to point a finger at anybody, is we have a number of people that will come to us after going to the VA, and they get the best technology. And if we were to put them on real ear, they would have a perfect fit, but the patient is not having a perfect experience. And typically the VA is not in the position of providing lifetime care packages and ongoing care for people, but rather fitting hearing aids and treating symptoms like, my hearing aid's not working, well, we can fix it. They don't have an ongoing program of care for most of their patients. And there may be exceptions to this in different VA offices, but I'm just saying, I see this a lot. And I will oftentimes then go through our regular protocol, and after adjusting the hearing aids, and giving them back to the patient and letting them listen to them or adjusting them while they're listening to them, they will look at me and say, why didn't this sounds great?
Right.
Why didn't they do this? And I'm
Right.
just saying, I'm not sure why they did what they did. I just tell you, this is the way we do it. And we're happy to do this to help you get the full benefit out of your hearing instruments.
Right. And I would definitely agree with you and echo. We're thankful for our VAs. We're most thankful for our veterans, obviously, and the freedom
And
that we enjoy. And there's a lot of good people working there, but they're serving millions of people. And
they can't do
no,
what we do.
no
It's
way.
not that they don't
Yeah.
they it's not that they don't want to or they
Yes.
wouldn't like to. They're not their business, if you say business model, if you will,
Right.
they're not set up to be
Right.
able to handle
Right.
the volume or
Care.
the immediacy of the need. People have a need when they have a need, not when my calendar says I have an opening.
And Tim, I hope it's okay. I'd like to open up the can a little bit here, because you led us to it. There's a connection internally between our outer ear, middle ear, inner ear, and our brain. And then that invites to the conversation cognitive hearing health. I'm just pulling those two worlds together. I know you know what I'm talking about, but for our audience, things can be so confusing. So could you really unpack how hearing loss and hearing well affect the cognitive performance of our beloved patients?
I'd be glad to share some things that I've been fortunate to receive from people much more intelligent than I am. But I will start by first saying that hearing in reality is done in the brain.
Yes, sir.
The ears send information, but the brain interprets that information, classifies that,
Mm.
and prioritizes it, and then responds to it. And so hearing loss, in most cases, at least that we deal with, tends to be a breakdown in the flow of information to the brain. Once it gets to the brain, that's typically beyond what we do once it gets there. So what we want to do is make sure that we send the brain the most effective, most useful information so that it can perform the way it's designed to perform. It was shared with me at a conference that the auditory cortex of the brain operates in two different areas. Initially, the initial process is to basically sort out what is being heard and kind of classify or categorize these sounds. And interestingly enough, once the brain sorts the sound and categorizes it, then, like a reflex, the brain will treat it according to the category that it's been placed in. Imagine if you went outside and you had to focus on every sound that you heard and identify and react to it all at the same time. Where would you be?
Mm.
You'd be in a crazy house.
Yeah, distracted,
You could
yes.
not do it. You would be not only be
Yes.
distracted, you would be so overwhelmed that
Right.
you would be stressed out beyond measure.
Right.
So it's by design that the brain is able to do this and sort things out. And so the next part of the processing is to focus in on something that has been categorized and say, this is what I choose to think about. And the brain can go back and forth and back and forth very quickly and still function. It doesn't have to just put blinders on and be doing one specific sound processing event. But it generally will focus on things that are communicative, things that are necessary for general and safe function of life. Those are things it does. Once it is sorted and categorized all those sounds, and this is assuming it's made it up the pathway without any restriction or obstruction, then we hear very well. If, according to scientists and neurologists out in Boulder, Colorado, their findings are accurate, which I take them to be, even with a very mild loss of hearing, the brain will look for other ways of processing sound that are easier or more effective. So instead of sorting everything out and processing it in this manner with the auditory cortex, even with a mild loss, the brain will shift and utilize the visual cortex to process these sounds. Now, when that happens, one advantage takes place. The visual cortex, we're told, can process sound as much as twice as fast as the auditory process, being a two-stage process there. And so it can get somewhere faster, and it can confer with other parts of the brain to analyze and come to conclusions as to what's going on. So basically, the shift takes place. Now we have a part of the brain that is not doing what it was designed to do, and we have another part of the brain that's having to take on a new role, and that leaves less cognitive reserves or resources within that part of the brain. And oftentimes something else will step up to help meet that shortcoming. Long story short, when we hear in manners that we're not intended to hear, there is a reduction in cognitive reserve. And when someone has hearing loss, this is much more noticeable when it occurs, because there's much more that has to be done to fill in degraded information that's missing, that in order to get the right response or an accurate or a meaningful response. So when all that is happening over time, we can find that at the end of the day, for example, someone might be fatigued. They may not have those the reserves there, and in the long run, it can eliminate that lack of cognitive reserves, can change some of the other things that those cognitive reserves might do, such as depositing memories or other things that it might be useful for in order for you to have a more meaningful life. To get into more specific detail about all the areas, it might behoove us to dig into some supporting resources in a future conversation in this. But in general, this is what happens to people, and we know that there is a decline in available resources to do other things as far as cognitive resources, and some of that can be a steady flow and a regular way of doing things if you have untreated hearing loss, and some can be something that occurs for a time or for a circumstance in certain environments.
So I would ask, kind of like, if we bring this down a second, can you give us kind of a general anecdotal overlook, like what's a person look like? And let's say that this this patient comes in, maybe they've got a family member, and they've never had hearing treatment before. They finally come forward, and what do they look like to you? What do they behave like to you? What's their cognitive performance look like in layman's terms comparatively by the time you get done and you take them through that initial rehab with hearing devices that you can definitely help them with and treat them with for life? What do the two different looks look like?
Well, I'll give you a few things that are very apparent. People coming in are guarded. They are very cautious. They're slower in responding, and they tend to be much less forthcoming in conversation. They oftentimes are more easily distracted, or they will be very intently looking at me to try to gather and glean as much information as they can. They tend to be much more serious in their demeanor, and uh, sometimes even stoic, where they seem to be uninterested because, again, they're guarded, and that's the way they might protect themselves from making a mistake or becoming vulnerable in some other way by revealing something about themselves that they're not ready to reveal. Once people know that we are listening, that we understand what they're going through, and we give them a taste of what we could do to help, and once they experience that fully, and sometimes not even fully, I see people's facial expressions relax. We know from studies that people can hear oftentimes with 85% less effort, and sometimes even more than that, just from studies that have been done when improper improvement is provided and proper treatment is provided for these individuals. I see them responding with much more freedom. I see them initiating conversation rather than waiting for it to be initiated by others. I see them smiling. That's one of the biggest things I see. Not only do they relax, but I see them starting to enjoy being a part of conversations. When I'm talking to a family member and I'm looking at them out of the corner of my eye, they are fully engaged, aware of all of elements of the conversation, and then they interject, and they're literally sitting back there enjoying life. And those are things that I see immediately. There are probably other things I could interject, but those are the ones that come to mind immediately. Here's a secondary one. I've even seen people's ability to speak from a clarity and pronunciation standpoint, diction standpoint, to be noticeably better as far as their speech. And I've also seen that their voice, which oftentimes is slightly elevated to try to encourage others to speak up on their behalf, falls back into a normal level of volume.
Tim, there's validation when obviously as we age, as we chronologically enhance, our speech can degrade, but obviously you've noticed this probably your whole career. But there is evidence and research that with a hearing loss, our speech will degrade faster for obvious reasons. We can't hear the articulation clearly. But I want to, for those of you out there, thanks for hanging with us, by the way. For those of you that are family members, I want you to hear what Tim's going to say. And we haven't pre-planned this, but I know he's got golden nuggets for us. By the same token, I want you to tell me what that family member of a hearing impaired person looks like when they first come in your clinic without help, and then that after look when the person they love has been helped.
Oftentimes, there are different emotions that you sense. Some people are anxious. They're thinking to themselves, I've been trying to get mom or dad in here for 4 years, and they look at me thinking, I feel them looking into me saying, you better not blow this for me.
Right.
Because I finally got him here. You better help him or help her. I sense that emotion and that type of feeling at times. I sense frustration and exasperation, like they're thinking, fix her or fix him, because this is so frustrating to me when we don't connect. And again, I see sometimes almost a hopelessness. Some people are thinking, this is a last resort. I really don't have a lot of hope that this is going to work, but we had to try it. I see those things. And then I also see love pouring out. Somebody who genuinely wants mom or dad to reconnect with them and their kids and their grandkids and people. They feel like they're missing out on life, and they want to give them that gift of relationships back that they think they've given up on or they don't realize they're missing. And so you see all those anticipatory feelings, whether they are with high expectations or almost skepticism. And then when they see the change take place in their family members, I have literally almost, many times every year, I see people with tears in their eyes. And I also see when somebody suddenly comes out of themselves and they see somebody that they haven't seen in 10 years because they're a different person in how they're able to relate and communicate and connect, they're overwhelmed with emotion. Others, uh, there's definitely a smile in virtually every situation. I don't see somebody in any way upset saying, I was hoping this wouldn't work,
Right. Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
could prove to them that it's just not worth it. No,
Right.
I don't see that. I only see the positive side of things. Uh, I do see that there is some resistance with some people. They still do not take ownership of communication and their
Right.
responsibility.
Right.
And so I have to make sure that they understand that we don't fix the damage in people's ears. We only help maximize what is left, and we don't necessarily, we can't reverse auditory deprivation or that loss of ability to recognize sounds even when they're presented due to long-term ineffective hearing over time. We can't reverse some things at all, but we can put them in a much better place, and we can help them to know what those limits are and what else we can do to make up for those differences of not having perfect childlike hearing
Right. Right.
at this stage of life.
So I also think I hear you say two things. One is we're treating the patient, and there's a before and an after look. But I think I also hear you say, inadvertently, we're treating the family member.
In some regards, yes, we are educating, which is a part of treatment. We are helping them to understand how the treatment works so that they might even be supplemental at times in assisting in the process for somebody who might not be able to do things due to physical limitations or what have you. For example, they might be able to utilize Bluetooth technology in conjunction with the hearing solution that they can assist with allowing the patient to get even greater benefit. But they're participating in those areas. I would say understanding how we communicate helps them to be in control of their own hearing and recognizing that everyone's on a hearing journey. And if I might take a time and say this, everyone should know their hearing number. We know our blood pressure. We know what normal is as far as blood pressure. We know our vision typically and what that is. Many people know their cholesterol number.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us know our PSA number.
Right,
There are
right.
numbers.
Yeah.
There are numbers all over the place, but very few people know their hearing number, or if they did, they wouldn't know what it means. And so understanding as a very basic baseline, what is my hearing relative to perfect hearing, which might be considered 20/20 hearing, if you will.
Right.
And according to Johns Hopkins University Medical Clinic and their understanding your hearing program, they give the indication that a -10 on the auditory scale would be considered perfect hearing.
Right.
And we don't see people typically with perfect hearing.
Right.
So if people don't have perfect hearing and they're down that scale, where am I and what does it mean? And so we would like to explore that in the future as well with a very simple way of where can I get that information and how can I have it available so I can track my hearing journey as it progresses and know when would it be appropriate to go beyond just understanding my hearing to understanding perhaps, is this affecting me in a way that it shouldn't be and that I could be doing something about?
Amen. And I want, in respect for your time, I want to close maybe with two things that that this just dovetailed to wrap up. One is that before and after look. I'm going to go back to that teenager, that young woman who said, I got my mom back.
Right.
And that's what hearing treatment can mean. And the second person I want to look at is you, Tim, that younger man who connected with his grandfather. And it stirred something in you and your family. You know, pharma drugs have side effects. Hearing treatment has natural, organic, empowering side effects. And one of those side effects is you that I see, and that from that conversation with your grandfather, those seeds that were planted in you at a younger age, from out of the blue, if you will. Tim, I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with us, for sharing some of those golden nuggets. Brother, I beg you, we've got to do this again soon. And I want to thank you because I want you to realize you are so investing in our patients, in our family members in the Clearwater, St. Petersburg area, in 40-plus retirement communities. You're investing in staff members. And just like those seeds were planted in you, my prayer is that these seeds will plant in all three of those audience groups and the periphery of people, other practitioners that may sit down and hang out with us. Until the next time, brother, I love you. Thank you so much for being here.
You as well.
Looking forward to it. Folks, thanks for hanging out with us till the very end. Please do us a favor. Please do someone you care about a favor. Like and subscribe. Please check out the show notes. There's going to be some rich nuggets in there. There's going to be a connection to Tim's practice website and some of the amazing resources that they have. Please go to their website and just check it out, even if you're in Clearwater, Florida here. And if you take vacation up in Ohio for some reason, it's okay to get your hearing checked at his clinic. And just family members out there, please take the time to listen to these gold nuggets. Empower those folks that you love. And staff members, please know that everything you do for our amazing people that you take care of is going to make a difference in and for the rest of their life. So until next time, guys, tune in. Thanks so much. God bless.